turning myself into the meme. So sometimes I'll look at a meme and I think I can make the TikTok version of this. So that's kind of how I started down that road. And some people said, aren't you worried what the perception is going to be, how people are going to perceive you? Some people may say you complain too much. And I'm thinking, well, humor is 90% complaining. If you think about it, if you make a joke, you're making a joke about a challenging situation. So I wanted to read this quote that pretty much sums up my reason for being funny. And here it goes. Humor also may function as an adaptive ego defense by enabling people to perceive the comical absurdity in highly challenging situations. In this respect, humor serves as both a defense mechanism and a way of coping with adversity. And I thought that pretty much summed up the reason why I have been doing what I'm doing. It's been a very challenging time, and my way of coping with this adversity has been through humor. I think a lot of people have been using humor as a coping mechanism because it's a hard time and you need to be able to laugh about it or see the absurdity in it to continue.
Welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. My name is Ashanti Branch, and I'm really glad you've joined us. Listen, today's guest is Arturo Aviña. Arturo is a teacher. He's a content creator. He's a TikToker, Instagrammer. He does some incredible TikToks about education and teachers and the funny and sometimes the challenging life of educators. There's a quote he gave that I really want to have you think about as you listen to this episode. A teacher's work environment is a student's learning environment. I'll say it again, just for those who didn't catch it. A teacher's work environment is a student's learning environment. And I think it's so important that that message resonates more than anything. Not only does he and I get a chance to share our mask and we talk about humor and the benefits of humor and how humor helps us, and also how sometimes it's a way of avoiding, is a way of a defense mechanism to not deal with the challenging adversities of life. I really am excited for this conversation. And one of the things that you're probably going to notice coming up pretty soon is that we're probably going to start interviewing a lot more educators, and not only obviously, but I think that this season and this school year has been such a wild experience for a lot of people, not only around the country, but around the world, that I'm really going to be focusing over these next couple of episodes around educators and how they are not only looking forward to the summer and a break and a rejuvenation, and some of them who are leaving the profession. You know, there's an attack on education if you haven't paid attention. There's an attack on truth. There's an attack on people believing things that are being taught to kids that are probably not as accurate as we want to let them believe. I believe that we have work to do as an education. We have an education system that needs work. And part of my work and being able to do the work in schools, like from the outside, and being able to have these conversations on this podcast is really around helping not only educators, but parents and community recognize that we need well-being to be a focus in schools. It can't be an afterthought. It can't just be counselors showing up when a tragedy happens. There should be counselors at schools, not the counselors who are making your classes. I'm talking about counselors who can sit down and talk to you. Our counselors here in the Bay Area have a workload of 3 to 4 to 500 students each. How is a teacher, how is a person to mentor and support and learn about 500 students? Well, for the most part, you're not. I'm not a counselor, so any counselor out there can push back, but you're not going to build 500 relationships. Some of the kids who are going to make sure they have a relationship with you are going to come to your office and they're going to ask you about this and that and make sure they're scheduled for the right things. That's that kind of kid I was in high school. And then there's going to be kids who you may never even see them. you've seen their name several times because you schedule their classes, but they're not coming to the office asking you for XYZ. They're not going to be demanding that you put them in pre-algebra or calculus, or there's some who don't even know who their counselor is. And so we got work to do. So anyway, you can see I can get excited about this. And I have a feeling that we're going to have some episodes where I am going to share about the education that I see and the education that I dream of. And I think if any of you know any teachers, educators, principals, administrators in the main office, or people working in any part of education, I'm talking about coaches, I'm talking about our janitorial staff, I'm talking about the custodial staff, I'm talking about the maintenance, I'm talking about people who cut the grass. Anyone you know working in education, if you would like to share this podcast with them, please do, and let them know. We would love to talk to them. I think that it would be important for us to hear from how education is showing up in so many ways, in so many lives. So thank you for being a part of this podcast. We invite you to, again, make a mask at millionmask.org. millionmask.org. And we also want you to know that coming up soon is a 24-hour relay challenge. It's a 5K challenge. The 24-hour relay is our non-sponsor sponsor. How about that? Our non-sponsor sponsor is the 24-hour relay challenge. If you have not yet signed up, we invite you to sign up to do a 5K wherever you are in the world. You don't have to go anywhere. You can stay in your own city, your own town. And on May 28th and May 29th, you can walk, run, hike, bike, swim 3.11 miles, 5 kilometers. And we invite you to do that and support the Million Mask Movement, support the Ever Forward Club, support our mission to create resources to support teen wellness. And we hope that you will get involved. And even if you don't want to walk or run or hike or bike, you can donate. You can make a page and help us bring in resources. We set a big goal for us, a big, hairy, audacious goal as BHAG. Thank you, Jim Collins. $50,000 we set to raise. And you can help us. We can do it. We can do it. We're matching the grant given to us by Rare Beauty that is helping to support teen wellness. And we're going to match it. Like, we're going to have our community match that grant, which is going to let our work stretch and serve even farther. So thank you so much. Sorry for the longest intro you probably heard in a while, but I really appreciate all of you. And please, if you haven't subscribed this podcast, please do that on any of the podcast platforms. And if you haven't given us a rating, please, we invite you to do that. Take care, everybody. Look forward to seeing you soon. Ever forward. Welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. My name is Ashanti Branch, and I'm really glad you've joined us. Today's guest is Arturo Aviña. I'm so glad to have you with us, Arturo. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Man. Well, look, Arturo, will you tell folks about yourself? What do you want folks to know about you before we jump into these conversations about masks? I like to let the guests tell us what they want us to know, and I could read a long bio, but I really like for you to share with folks what you want them to know.
Okay, sounds good. So, as you said, my name is Arturo Aviña. I am a theater teacher here in Los Angeles. I've been teaching for 19 years, and it's been quite a journey. It's a little lengthy, but if I may go into it, I'd like to give that background. So, when I was in college, I always wanted to work with kids. So, when I was in college, I majored in psychology and education, and I thought I would become a child psychologist. By the time I finished my major, I realized that I didn't like psychology enough to continue with it, but the education aspect took over. So I began teaching pretty much right out of college. I started teaching kindergarten. And I was put into this grade level not knowing how it would go. It wasn't my first choice, but I'm so glad it happened. The school I landed at had this tradition where every kindergarten class had to create a play for their culmination. And theater is actually not my background. So I was kind of thrown into that situation, sink or swim, and I had to figure it out. And I actually ended up loving it. It became the highlight of the school year, and it kept going year after year. And that kind of snowballed into me creating an after school drama club. I did it voluntarily. And then someone said to me, you should buy a video camera and start filming what you're doing. So I did that, bought a video camera, and I thought, well, I just spent all this money on a camera. I could try making some movies. So then I got into film editing. And if I may toot my own horn, some of the stuff that I did ended up getting written about in the Huffington Post and the LA Times. And yeah, it was a very rewarding experience. And with that under my belt, I applied to this position to teach theater full time. And I remember when I went into the interview, the my boss asked me, why should we hire you? You don't have any formal theater experience. You have the right credential, but we don't know why we should hire you. But by that point, I already had that experience, so I could go to the table with that. They took a chance on me, and 7 years later, here I am. I'm still teaching theater. I work with 2,000 students all over LA, and I get to teach theater and have a lot of fun with it.
What? That's awesome. That's awesome. What a beautiful education journey. Now help me understand the 2000. Like every year you teach 2000 students, like, or do
That
you have
is
a you
correct.
you have
That
like a
is correct.
staff?
Well, the way it works, I mean, they were spread thin. So one of the really cool things about my school district is that we have an arts education program for elementary school. And we hire art teachers, dance teachers, theater teachers, and and we're spread out all over the district. And each one of us is assigned to 5 schools. So I have a Monday school, a Tuesday school, a Wednesday school. And at each school, I work with 5 classes for 9 weeks.
Nice.
And then after those 9 weeks, I take on a new group and work with 5 more classes. So when you add up all those numbers,
Wow.
five classes a day, 5 schools, different groups
That's
every 9 weeks, it adds up to 2,000 kids a year.
Oh man, that's exciting. That's exciting.
It's
Thank you
pretty
for
cool.
that. It sounds like it, and I think, and now that wasn't one of your passions originally. That sounds like, is that, do you feel like you're right where you're supposed to be?
I do actually. It's funny how one thing just led to another. I had no idea my career would go in this direction. I
Mm.
started off thinking I wanted to be a psychologist. That didn't that didn't feel right. I went into education. That felt right. I was thrown into theater. I figured it out. I loved it. And then that led to film editing and making short films. And now lately I've turned that camera on myself and started making TikToks and using those editing skills to make memes. So that's another hobby of mine, content creation.
Oh man. Well, I that is how I learned about you and your work. I've been super juiced to like be following your work, and so thank you for being a part of this podcast. One of the things that we do in this conversation is that, as I told you before, we it's just opportunity for you and I to kind of maybe learn more about each other, right? I think you've shared
Hmm.
some things, and so with the idea of the mask, with our and as a theater teacher, you probably have lots of different correlations to masks and putting on characters and things like that. Um,
Hmm.
but today we get to talk about our own selves.
That's
So,
harder. That's harder sometimes. It's easier to play a different character sometimes.
man, I want, yeah. I mean, I thank you for that. Thank you for acknowledging that, because I think sometimes it is right, and I think maybe you find that with, well, maybe we'll get into that with students, right? Where we see them, what character we see them showing up as, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
And when we get to know them for real, and we get to see a little bit behind that mask, sometimes they're more uncomfortable when when we really see them sometimes, than when they're being who they are used to showing up as.
I see that all the time. Sometimes I'll do a puppet unit with them, for example, and it's easier for them to talk through a puppet and another character versus them talking as themselves. It's very interesting
Yeah.
to see. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I imagine it's going to come up, but there was a elementary school we did a workshop in a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago only, and one of the boys in the elementary, it was sixth grade. He's sixth grade, so we call him a young man. Um, he said, "Yeah, I don't really even feel comfortable letting people see my real face. Like, he's gotten so used. I mean, imagine he's sixth grade, which means he started wearing a mask in the fourth grade. He was like, what, 9 years old. He's been having this thing on his face for a fifth of his life, and
Hmm.
now he's having a discomfort, an idea that at some point they're going to say you don't need to wear those in school anymore, right? And he's worried, like, I don't even want people to see my face anymore, and I'm wondering what we're going to experience in the next season of this work around these personal protection masks that are
Hmm.
going to have students feeling somewhat a different level of discomfort, right? Because they are are not used to people having to judge them by looking at them all the way, you know?
Right, right. They've gotten used to hiding half of their face,
Yeah.
and some of their classmates have never seen them without their mask. So now, when the masks come off, the classmates, I don't know, I'm not sure what the reaction is, but I mean, some classmates, I'm sure, would be like, "Oh, it's not you. You don't look the way I thought you looked," and they may internalize that and think, "Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Maybe I'll just put it
Yeah.
back on."
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder when you said half of their face, I wonder, I mean, above the nose is probably maybe more like 2/3, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're
You
right. You
know?
just see the eyes, and you kind of, I don't know if this happens to you, but uh like in my mind, I kind of filled in the second half of the face. I kind of imagine what they look like, and then they look completely different when they take it off.
It has happened. We were having a pizza at one of our clubs recently, and a kid was over there eating our pizza, and I was like, I talked to the mentor. I'm like, "Hey, why is that kid over there eating our pizza?" You know, and the kid looked at me. I thought I was whispering. He said, "It." He said, "Mr. Branch, it's me, it's Sergio." I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. I've never even seen your face before. I didn't even know what you looked like. I could not even recognize that I didn't know what this kid. I've been with him 3 months. 3 months
Hmm.
I've been with this kid every week, and I didn't even know what he looked like. And I was like, oh, how interesting." And I said, "I'm sorry. I know who you are." But in the moment I didn't really have a clue who he was, you know? But that's the world we're gonna experience coming up pretty soon, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think we're learning to navigate it for sure. And mask mandates are being lifted left and right, and it's still
Yeah.
a period of uncertainty, though.
Yeah.
There's some doubt where there are some schools of thought think where we think, is this really the safest choice? Is this something we're just going to have to live with? And you know, best of luck to us.
Yeah.
I think we all have really mixed emotions about it.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the journey. Welcome to the
Hmm.
journey. Um, so as a guest, you get to decide who goes first. So um, we're gonna share a mask, and we would decide to share front, and then back. Or as you get to go first, you could decide who goes first, and you could decide how we share. So you get to
All right.
choose.
All right. So I'm going to ask you to go first and
Okay.
start with the front.
All right. Fantastic. All right. So I am going to write. Oh, I already wrote it, so I just scratched out. I wrote the wrong city for some reason. I'm not sure why I wrote the city. Um, so this is my mask. Okay, so on the front of the mask, this is the mask card. So I'm using this. So it says on the front, funny, hardworking, caring, and serious.
Hmm.
And this image is inspired. I was walking down. I was in the mission of San Francisco. There are these murals on the wall, and I saw this amazing image, and I'm not sure. I just was trying to recreate that image. But when I think about uh, these words, funny, serious, caring, and hardworking, normally it's three, but I just got carried away. Um, the one that is feeling really present right now is serious, and I think um,
Hmm.
like and hardworking. Sometimes and they're interesting. They're opposite of each other, right? It's like funny and serious, and then caring,
Hmm.
hardworking. I think sometimes it's like serious and hardworking get like locked into each other, and then the funny and caring is over here, and they almost sometimes feel like they don't interact. Like it's hard for me to be really serious and funny, right? Or like like
Right.
like like.
Unless you're sarcastic, then that could kind of come.
and
You
then
can
it's not,
combine
and then it's not really funny.
it.
It's only funny to me, right? So somebody else is not laughing. They're like, "Are you making fun of me?" I'm like, "Oh, that wasn't intentional. That was a joke." But I think like right now in this season of this work of organization and nonprofit, like there's so many things that got to get done, and I feel sometimes like the pile on my desk is kind of rising, but I think I've been trying to find room to be serious and funny in a caring way, right? Where it's like, hey, it's a lot to do, we got a lot going on, and hey, we can still take a moment and laugh and whatever. But sometimes when I'm getting serious, there's no smile, there's no there's like intensity,
Hmm.
intensity in the work. And sometimes that's how I feel like it's very compartmentalized in how I'm showing up. I think that's how the front of my mask shows up.
I have a question about your mask. I noticed
Yeah.
the tongue with the arrows pointing in different directions. That was very creative. What's that about?
Well, there was an image on the wall in the mission, and almost like a some
Okay.
kind of cultural mask that they had
Got
painted.
it.
In
Okay.
the mission in San Francisco, there's all these murals. You can go on these mural walks, and there's
Hmm.
murals all over the walls. And I don't know what it meant. I just when I think about
But
the
it meant
organization,
something. Yeah, but it meant something to you. So I mean, you put it in
yeah.
there for a reason. So what does it mean to you?
Well, when I think of when I think of the organization that I started called Ever Forward, it's kind of like always kind of like going forward, right? Like it's always like, how do I think about an arrow, like if you have a bow and arrow, it's going to go one
Hmm.
direction, right? It's not going backwards. It's going, and once you let it go, it's not coming back, right? So
Hmm.
I think of I think when I was writing it, I was like still curious about what the emit in the image that I saw, and it was kind of a interesting image, right? It's almost like words, right? I think about there was this one saying that I used to hear, and it says there's three things that you don't get back, right? It's the
Hmm.
spoken word,
Hmm.
it's a shot arrow, and it's a missed opportunity. And I think looking at
Okay.
those arrows coming out is like some things you don't get back. And I think like when we say something, if we're not careful what we say to others, when we're not
You can't take
thoughtful,
it back. Yeah.
sometimes you don't get to you may say sorry, and they may accept the apology, but it still landed, right? It's
It
still
still landed, and it can
it's
still stay in the back of their head. And
yeah.
even though they've accepted the apology, those words stay with you.
Yeah. So I only thought about it in that depth when you asked the question, but yeah, I'm still like grappling with that image I saw on that wall. So something about that image on the wall really resonated with me.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Right on. All right. Well, you can now share the front of your mask.
All right.
All
So
right.
we have some things in common. Mine is not as cute as yours. Mine is pretty simple, but I'll tell you why I did what I did. So this is
Okay.
mine right here.
Okay. Okay.
So
Awesome.
funny, friendly, creative, and serious.
Nice.
Um, so in this picture, I have, my eyes are pointing in different directions. It's a reference to my goofy, silly side. Could also be me, just a frazzled teacher. Could be that as well. There's the eyebrow raised. I consider that kind of comical. I put glasses on myself. That's the serious part. And I'm smiling. That's me being friendly and funny and friendly and
That's
funny.
that's cool image. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So I think that's what I try to project, or so that's the mask I wear, that I present to the world.
And we have actually. I mean, it's interesting. We both wrote four. We both wrote four
Hmm.
words, and two of them are the same. That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's
The
really cool.
opposite one's funny and serious. Well, there's a time and a place for both, right?
Yeah, for real. I mean, I think yes, for sure. And I think maybe it's finding the right time and place for them, right?
Hmm.
As a teacher, I did you do you find that students know when you're do they get the both sides? My students always thought I was always mean. Like they thought like why are you so and I wasn't a theater teacher, I was a math teacher, right? So like there was a lot of seriousness sometimes, but like I think I was being funny. I thought I was being cool and kind and caring and all of those things. They're like, "Why are you always so serious?" I'm like, "Am I? Am I always so serious?" Uh,
I know. I find that the older ones get the sarcasm and the humor. The younger ones don't always get it. So I gotta, not use sarcasm with them. Like, they'll find kindergartners. They'll find trash on the floor and they'll give it to me, and I'll be like, "Do I look like a trash can?" And they don't. So they don't quite get it. It's very literal. The older ones get it though. Yeah, but I do it. I still do it with a smile, and I think they get that it's a joke.
yeah, yeah. Or then some of the older ones will answer the question. Well,
Right.
I'm like, okay, don't start no stuff right here. Oh man, okay, right on. Okay, right. Then, well, maybe let's see what happens on the back. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. All right. So the
Now we're
back
on the
is
back.
it your turn or my
Yes, I think
turn?
it's on me. It's on me. So
Okay.
All right. Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can. Okay, here we go. So I wrote self doubt, I wrote fear of failure, and I wrote my brother's mental health and my sadness about it. Um,
Wow.
so when I think about self doubt, I think about uh, like I've been doing a lot of work since this podcast started, but also as I talk about my mask a lot now. Like normally I would keep it to myself. Like I would make masks and workshops, but I never had to really talk about them. In this podcast, I find myself talking about them all the time, and I'm doing a lot of evaluation. Like, am I stuck in some of them?
Hmm.
And what are the what are the newer masks that I sometimes also have adopted, right? And when I think about self doubt, like I was telling you before we started the show, I said I'm always so like inspired by your work, like the stuff you create, because I'm like I want to be creating more content, and I want to. But sometimes I'll make a video and it's just so plain.
Hmm.
It's just me talking to the camera, and then I'll be like, I'm not posting that, and I'll be, and and it happens over and over again. And I'm like, why am I stuck in this rut? Feel like sometimes. And so that the self doubt is more me doubting. And I heard this. I heard a podcast this morning where Simone, I think his name is Simone Soul, I think, or how you pronounce her last name. She was saying something like if I only post things that I think people are gonna like, then maybe I'm not being very genuine. Maybe I'm not posting things that I really want to post. I'm just
Hmm.
posting so I don't make anybody upset and I don't ruffle any feathers. But sometimes I make some videos where I'm upset, but I don't post them because I'm like, well, I don't want to deal with the drama that may come back to me from that. And it's self doubt. It's linked to self doubt and fear of failure. I put it out there. Not that every video needs to do great, but anyway, those are the things that I like. I've constantly and I found myself continually starting to like learn to be like, just post it. Like, what am I posting it
Hmm.
for? Is it to help somebody? Is it to just inspire, or is it just for my own ability to say I have a thought that I want to share, right?
Yeah.
And I think that those are the things I'm having to do something about. And yeah, my brother's mental health is one that it's something I carry. He's in jail right now, and
Mm.
I'm
I'm
really sad
sorry.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's and I'm a big proponent of advocating with people for mental illness, and not only having a brother who's dealt with it, but also knowing that I couldn't help him. Like I tried. I didn't know how sometimes, and I love him, right? I love my brother. And I feel
Right.
bad for people who I see walking around the streets who are talking to themselves, because that's what my brother
Hmm.
does, and I wish I could help them all, right? But I can't, right? And so sometimes I just feel a little bit uh yeah, I feel I don't want to use the word helpless. Is not the real word, but is I feel like I want to do more, and so
Yeah.
yeah, that's the back of my mask.
Wow. That's intense. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you
Well.
for listening.
Well, I hope your brother's getting the help he needs. I don't know if services are provided while while he's in jail, but I hope that he receives the help that he needs.
Yeah, me too. One of the things I've learned, and I have a godson who's also incarcerated right now, and he some places every night they call your name, they make you get your medicine, and some places if you don't ask for it or you don't like,
Mm,
they could care less, And
yeah.
so I think it's really interesting how the system, uh, the justice system, sometimes doesn't support people to get better. If you are on if you do have a mental illness and you need medicine, like so anyway, I think about that a lot. My godson, luckily, is
Yeah.
at a place right now where he can they call your name every night, and if your cup is still full, they'll come and get you. They'll be like, come get your medicine, right? Like they're not
Hmm.
allowing you to to not take it because it helps regulate
Right.
the safety of everybody in the building.
Right.
Um, but he's been at some places where I said, "You take medicine?" He's like, "No, I haven't seen a counselor in weeks." I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, and I don't know so all those things you think about, like how do we support people who are not bad people, but who or have a who have an illness that causes them to act in ways that
Right.
unfortunately we lock people in cages for, as opposed to finding the more support for. So
Yeah, and you
yeah,
got to also think if there were more talk about mental health early on, it's not talked about. It wasn't talked about like the way it is now,
yeah,
years ago. I
yeah,
mean, if and you got to think if more people had received the services they needed years ago, early on, all this could have been prevented
yeah,
for many of them.
yeah. I agree, and I think that's the case, and I think that's what we're trying to do right now with this movement is really help people talk about it earlier
Hmm.
and realize you're
Hmm.
not the only one, and then realize, well, maybe we should talk about it more, and maybe we should get support for it, right? Instead of criminalizing it, right? And I think that's what we have work to do in our own communities and society too.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah,
many of us on ourselves as well.
that's right. That's right. I agree. All right. Thank
All
you. Thank you.
right.
Thank you, man.
All right, so I guess it's my turn. So we also have some things in common here. I just wrote down three. I could have gone on, I think, but this is what I wrote for mine: anxiety, doubt, and fear. And I just put fear because it's so broad. It could be there are fears of multiple things, and actually,
Yeah.
anxiety and doubt are forms of fear as well. So
Yeah.
I put those in there. Anxiety. It's actually been. I'm not alone in this. It's been worse the past couple of years for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. The pandemic, I think, was the thing that tipped everything over. But I've always been kind of an anxious person, and this may be too much TMI here, but lately it's been to the point where it affects my sleep. Right, I'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and my mind is just thinking about all the things that could go wrong the next day, and I'm just tossing and turning. And I talked to my doctor about it, and for the first time ever, I'm on like Xanax, so it's there and it's available have if I just can't sleep. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of new territory for me, having the anxiety and overdrive the way it's been lately. I don't really show it. I'm in front of my kids, and there's a big smiley face, and I'm performing. And same thing when I'm out and about with my friends. It's not something that's normally talked about, or it may be talked about jokingly in passing, but it's not something that's generally shown to the general public. My husband sees it.
Mm,
He feels me tossing and turning for hours there. So that's
yeah.
one thing that's behind the mask there, the
Yeah.
anxiety.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wrote down was doubt. I always wonder if what I'm doing is like if anyone cares. I'll put in all this effort into a lesson plan, for example, and then if it doesn't go the way I planned, I sometimes think, huh, am I have I reached the end of my rope? Should I look for another career? Am I any good still? So those thoughts kind of pop in as well. And sometimes even with like content creation too, like I'll make a TikTok or a meme, and the initial idea is an idea that I think is funny. It makes me laugh, so I'll do it. And then I'll do it, and then I have all these second thoughts. I'm like, no, this is stupid. I look dumb. It's not going to work. And I shouldn't think that way, because in the end, it shouldn't matter. What should matter is if it's
Mm,
something that brings me joy. And
yeah.
regardless whether or not it's well received, I should just do it if it's something that initially made me happy. But
Yeah.
doubt steps in, and I start to think, well, who do I think I am creating this? Like I look like a clown. Maybe I do, but but uh, so the doubt seeps in with my career and with this hobby where I'm exploring a creative side.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about that? Because
Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
I, that part is something that I've been working on. So I would love to just like, how do you do that? Like, I mean, not how do you do that? Like, let me be more specific. Like when you say to yourself, "Oh, I made this thing. It made me feel good," and then, like, did you have to like just say? it's not for them, it's for me? Did you like, is there a way that you framed it so that you were able to like, because I think that's what sticks to me a lot of times. Like when I'm making this thing, I'm like, this is what I gotta say, and then I'll stop recording and I'll be like, and I'm like, yeah, nah, I'm not gonna share that one. That's not gonna, and I'll stop right there. Like, there's no, I don't have another like extra like motivator that says no, do it anyway, right? And I get stuck right there where I'm like, yeah, nah, I don't think that's gonna work. And so I would love to like, if there's something, and maybe people out there who want to create, who have already, maybe you've written stuff, maybe you have a journal, maybe you've dreamed of like creating something, and they also are like trying to find how to get past that doubt, right? That worry. That is there a strategy you use that helps you to like keep going anyway?
Yeah, eventually I think I'm actually gonna regret it more if I don't create and share it. That's what I that's what tips the scales for me. Because I'll do something and I'll look at it and I think it's funny, and then the doubt seeps in. Like, I got to go with my first instinct. If it's funny, just go with it. And that's what my partner tells me all the time. Just go with your gut. Go with your gut. So, and I go through my moment of doubt, and then I eventually just say, you know what? I personally like it, and I want to share it. And if I don't share it, I'm gonna have that what if in the back of my head. So just share it. You have nothing to lose by sharing it, honestly.
Yeah. That's a, what you just said right there is actually pretty powerful for me. Like I think that I'm more upset with myself on the stuff that I didn't post, that I created,
Hmm.
because I've been like, why am I being so scared, afraid, worried, doubtful? Like, why am I not more courageous? Like, and I'm
Hmm.
more upset about myself for not doing it than the fact that I did it, and
Uh-huh.
my hair may be messed up, or the somebody's walking around in the background or something, whatever it may be, you know. Hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I mean, I think, yeah, that's what at least helps me get over that hump. Just create, just do it. And the thing with like content creation, you just never know. There are times where I've made something and I've put all this thought and effort into it, and I spent all this time editing, and I share it, and it does okay, or not that good, or not that okay. And then I'll just post like the dumbest thing that took 3 seconds to make, and that takes off. I mean, you just never know. You just never know. And that's what just makes me think, bottom line, just do what is going to bring you joy.
I think we just
I'm sorry.
froze. Give me
But the
one
person will
second.
stand by.
Hello.
Stand
I think we
by.
dropped off here.
Oh man, Arturo, I don't know how much we're gonna leave in the recording of our little tech issues. So hey, folks, uh, this is Ashanti Branch. We're taking off the mask. I'm not introducing this again. We've already done this. Listen, we are regrouping again after some tech issues, and so I really want to appreciate you, Arturo, for being so kind with your time and helping us just come back and kind of catch up where our technology dropped off.
Oh, of course, I'm really happy to do this. So no problem. We go with the flow. It's part of teaching. So I'm
Well, I
used
think
to it.
thinking about teaching in that way, like, have you imagine you've had lessons that went like not the way you planned, you know?
Oh, all the time, all the time. Yes, I have an idea of what a lesson's going to look like. I plan it out in my head, and then I get to school and the Wi-Fi dies, or there's a fire drill, or a lockdown drill because it is America, and and things don't always go as planned. So you need to be ready to, pivot, if we want to use that word, at the
Oh
last minute.
man. Well, I can feel the pivot right here, man. I think the last thing you were doing was giving me some advice, and I really appreciate it because I've told you that I've been wanting to make more content, and I think I used to, well, I'm working out of the fear. I think it was more fear and perfectionism and all these other words that people were telling me, or they're helping me figure out what's in my way. Um,
Hmm.
but because you create a lot of things that are like really funny, like I think I'm funny, but I don't think I'm planned funny. I think I'm like accidental funny, you know? Like I'll say something, I'll, I'll just say something funny, but I don't think I'm always funny. Sometimes it's like sarcasm slash like a joke that just doesn't land right. Um,
Hmm.
but how did you get? What are your thoughts about humor in the classroom, and what are your thoughts on humor in general? But that's kind of how I learned some of your work around they're really entertaining, but also funny and lighthearted. But definitely talking about teachers because I think teachers are funny sometimes.
Yeah, I think I work with a lot of really talented and funny people. Teachers have a great sense of humor for sure, and it's funny the way I started to create comedic content. Well, not coincidentally, it was during the pandemic, a very difficult, challenging time for all of us. It continues to be. The pandemic isn't over, and I sometimes think I have a choice. I can laugh or I could cry, and my way of coping was through humor and laughter. So during this pandemic, we're shut down, and I began to dabble in memes. So I started making memes. I was inspired by other teacher meme accounts, and that led to TikTok. I started to turn the camera on myself and filming TikToks. And the way I thought of TikTok was I'm turning myself into the meme. So sometimes I'll look at a meme and I think, I can make the TikTok version of this. So that's kind of how I started down that road. And some people said, you're aren't you worried what the perception is going to be, how people are going to perceive you? Some people may say you complain too much, and I'm thinking, well, humor is 90% complaining. If you think about it, if you make a joke, you're making a joke about a challenging situation. So I wanted to read this quote that pretty much sums up my my reason for being funny. And here it goes. Humor also may function as an adaptive ego defense by enabling people to perceive the comical absurdity in highly challenging situations. In this respect, humor serves as both a defense mechanism and a way of coping with adversity. And I thought that pretty much summed up the reason why I have been doing what I'm doing. It's been a very challenging time, and my way of coping with this adversity has been through humor. I think a lot of people have been using humor as a coping mechanism because it's a hard time, and you need to be able to laugh about it or see the absurdity in it to continue.
Yeah. Can you say that again? So, humor is a defense mechanism and a way to deal with adversity. Is that how you said it?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I like that. And I think one of the things I noticed today, I did a workshop today, um, and there was a young man who there was a moment in the workshop. And I think when we talk about masks, you and I made our masks together, but young people are doing it. And he's a 15-year-old, and something happened in the room. Something hit his funny bone, and he started laughing. Right, and so
Mm-hmm.
this room was a small room, so it was not a lot of people, but he started laughing, and then he passed the funny bone to the young man over there, and he started laughing, and then they got passed. And what you know quickly, if you don't catch the funny bone, if you don't like get a blocker in between it, the room can get out of control really quick, right?
Uh
So,
huh.
as I said, especially when we talk about emotions, right? Because if young people are not comfortable talking about emotions, I can just find something to laugh at to lighten the mood in my own mind. I may not be like psychologically saying I am feeling uncomfortable, so I better make somebody laugh. It's just a reaction that happens, and I started saying, "Hey, I get the funny. I know sometimes we laugh to like deal with other emotions. So yeah, let the
Mm-hmm.
laugh out. Let's all just laugh." And then he started taking it to level 10, and I was like, "Oh no, I do want you to laugh if you need to laugh, but now we're taking it to another level of laughter that is just kind
Mm-hmm.
of," and I'm like, let me have you back, come back. And so it was one of the moments where you're like, I want to let the laughter do what it needs to do, because it was I think it was a defense mechanism, is what I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of young people do in their work. And then also it's a way of like dealing with whatever he didn't want to feel or let be felt. And so but then it was my role as a facilitator in the moment to say, but I do need you to come back. I do need you to come back, right? Let's take a
Yeah.
few minutes. Let's
Yeah.
let ourselves laugh. Okay, it's okay. All right, cool. Okay, come back, right? And how do we definitely in the context of a classroom, but definitely even amongst friends, right? You're at a movie theater, something happens funny. One person thinks it's funny, another person doesn't see it as funny,
Mm-hmm.
but those are moments, right? It was like, well, from one thing, one person's humor can be another person's like tragedy for sometimes.
It can definitely work that way too. And humor isn't universal, it's subjective. What you think is funny, others may not. It's great though when other people do share a similar sense of humor and you can laugh together. It's a bonding experience. And I feel like if you are able to laugh with somebody else and you laugh together, it's a connection that you create there.
Yeah. I think last week, I mean, a couple of days ago, I'm trying to think, when was it last? Like when we were having our tech issues, there was a lot of laughing happening. Like I was, I was laughing, trying to keep from like crying or cursing. Right? Like it was like, like what's wrong with the internet? And then I was like, what's wrong with this internet? Like it was going to be one of those two coming out, but I said, all right. So I appreciate you for be having a good sense of humor to see what was happening on this side because I remember once I was interviewing a man and right before we were starting, it was the tech was acting up, right?
Hmm.
And like the interview started, I was like, "Hey, welcome," and he was like, "Hey, what are you feeling right now?" And I'm like, he turned the interview on me, like because I was like smiling like everything was fine, but
Uh-huh.
like 30 seconds before, like it was like chaos, right? And I'm like, huh? What are you doing here? What's happening? And he was like, well, you know, what just happened right before we started? And I was like, are we going there? And I said, all right. And it was a beautiful moment, right? Where I would not have, I mean, I wasn't thinking of other masks. I had already had a mask made. I was going to talk about it, but I wasn't going to talk about the fact that like 5 seconds ago, I was going to throw my
Hmm.
computer through the wall, right? It wasn't like
Right.
and it was great. I'm glad he brought it up because it was a way for me to just really get even more present, you know?
Yeah, no, that's smart, and it ties into social emotional intelligence. And social emotional learning. There's been so much talk about that over the past year, especially with this return to school and giving our students an outlet to process their emotions. And I think it's been very important to give students that space to talk about, write about, create about what their experiences have been and process their emotions.
Yeah. I guess one question is around theater and around masks and around teaching. I think one of the things I've really started to think about in this podcast is that we're probably going to start interviewing a lot more teachers and educators because I think that
Hmm.
I mean I was a teacher for 10 years, administrator, and I have a big heart for teachers, especially knowing how not only how hard this year was, but how hard teaching is. Period.
Hmm.
Right? Like so, not only that's a year, this last 2 years, or almost feel like three now, right? But
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
um, what do you think is something that teachers maybe in your community need, or if they're having like side talk, more like the stuff they say maybe in a staff meeting, but what are the things that you feel teachers need right now? What do people in the world need to understand about the challenge that teachers are facing, or anything around that kind of thought process? Because I think that some people don't. I think a lot of parents got it after the pandemic that how hard teachers work, but I think before
Hmm.
they were seem to be oblivious that this was hard work. You know?
Right, right. And yeah, and I'm glad that many parents got to see that, and I do feel like many of them um, grew an appreciation for us that wasn't there before. Not everyone. I think that it's worked the other ways as well. And over the past y- 2 years, with there's been such a shift in the way the public views teachers. We started off the beginning of this pandemic being heroes, and then a couple months later we were lazy and entitled and at public enemy number one, and they really had no clue what we were going through, and how that lack of support affects our morale. So I would just like people to understand that a teacher's working environment is the student's learning environment. So if you are not supporting your teachers and encouraging them, they're going to internalize that.
That's that man. Man, I'm right. I'm writing that quote down. A teacher's work environment is a student's learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's powerful, and I think
Yeah.
that's so critical. I taught in my experience of teaching. I taught in public, private, and charter. I taught in high school, middle school, and a K8, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I really saw the difference of how schools are set up and the ones that are high performing and the ones that are not so performing. um, and I think that even small stuff, right? Like there was one school, it was happened to be a private school, um, like once a month, something small, right? But something once a month, they would have this. It was called Bagel Day, and it would be bagels and donuts and fruit for people to eat. People don't do carbs, right? But it was like you know what category I'm in, right? But nonetheless, like it was like nonetheless, it was like, but it was once a month. It was for all the birthdays of that month, and it was like the parent committee were responsible for it. They came and they brought stuff, and it was like when I left that school, I think I was like, I'm gonna, we're not having this thing anymore. It was almost the smallest thing, but when I went back to the public school, I brought it with me, and I said, we need to invest in this.
Yeah.
I appreciated it. I think teachers would appreciate it, and I think it's just a token of just being seen, right? Like it's a token of like, you know, the
I mean,
cost
it
is
says that you're
negligible.
remembered. Yeah, someone's thinking of you, which is a really priceless thing to have happen. As small as it is appreciated. You know, it just says that you're cared about and you're being thought of.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, you know I thank you so much. I thank you for the work you're doing, and I'm excited to hear about this next group that you're working with. And you know I think what I'm hoping is that not only as I continue to be inspired by the work you're doing, I get inspired to be like, okay, I'm gonna be a little bit more courageous. I'm gonna be a little more courageous. So for all the courage you're giving those young people on stages and acting plays and you know skits and films and theater. I want to thank you for inspiring others because maybe people won't get to tell you, but I want to let you know that you inspire me, brother. And so I appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Right on, man. Well, look, I want you to tell folks where they can follow you because we've been talking about your channel and we haven't said it yet. So tell them how they can follow you and tell if there's any other things you're working on that you want people to know about. Please tell them. We'll put it all in the show notes. But I really would love you to let folks know how they can support the work that you're doing.
All right, sounds good. So on Instagram, I am schooled by Arturo. And on TikTok as well, same handle, schooled by Arturo. So that's where I create and post most of my content. So check me out there. It's all about teacher life and the joys and sorrows of being in this profession.
Oh man, fantastic! Well, we'll have the links there in the show notes. And is there any last message you want to say? Anything last thing you want to say as we close off this experience around masks and education and us as adults and us as people who occupy these bodies of being our full selves?
Something I would like to say. That's a big question. You know
No, no pressure, no pressure.
well, you know, the thing that's been on my mind, to be really honest with you, is all of the legislation being passed in some states that are very anti-teacher, very anti-education. There is so much misinformation and disinformation out there, misleading people. So I would say take the time to dig deeper, do your research, talk to some teachers to get a real perspective, and try to understand how these attacks on public education are completely demoralizing and will ultimately just destroy our education system.
Thank you, man. And with that, that's the Taking Off the Mask podcast. So, folks out there, if you want to make a mask, you can do that at millionmask.org. I almost forgot our website. Thank you for being a part of this, Arturo. I'm so excited to connect with you, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you, man. See you soon. Bye, everybody. Taking Off the Mask podcast is produced by Ryan Louie. Editing, videography is also by Ryan Louie. Graphics by Kelly Wong. And a special thanks to the team at Ever Forward, Vanessa Cortez and Kevin Romero. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of the creation of this podcast. As we hit this 1 year anniversary, we hope that everyone who's been a part knows that they're a part of the Taking Off the Mask experience. And we look forward to you being a part of it as well. If you liked what you heard today, please like, subscribe, and share. And we look forward to us continuing to offer conversations that matter. Take care. See you soon.